Welcome back to CanHammer, everybody, your source for Nightvault from the Great White North. Tonight's episode, Echoes of Glory. Welcome back to CanHammer, everybody, your source for Nightvault from the Great White North. Today we will be looking at the cards from Echoes of Glory. Now this is to be perfectly honest, it was not exactly clear what this is. It says that it contains all the universal cards added in the Garrix, Reavers, and Steelheart's Champions expansions for Warhammer Underworld's Nightvault. As far as I know, there were no Reavers or Champions expansions. I think they came out in separate warbands, but it wasn't clear what cards they contained. Was it just the core set cards from Shadespire, because you can't buy the core set Shadespire box anymore, or were there new cards in there because it said expansions for Nightvault? So apparently there are new cards in here. So anyway, apparently also this is not very much worth buying, but you can make your own decision after you watch this video. So let's crack it open. It may well be just a whole bunch of cards that we already have because we had Shadespire, but we will see soon enough. Alright, there's a bunch of cards in here, boom. Must be about 60 cards or so. Alright, let's go over the objectives. So these are all generic cards. Okay, so let's have a look. All or nothing. Scoreless in the third end phase if you have scored no objective cards this game. Well, that's not a very good card, is it? Arcane Implosion. So I guess that these are new cards because Steelheart and Garrix were the very first sets released, and there were no spells back then. So these must be new cards that were released with those two warbands. And now, in case you wanted the new cards without having to buy miniatures that you already have, they released this. So that's what this must be. So it might be worthwhile. Arcane Implosion. Score immediately if an enemy fighter is taken out of action while attempting to cast a spell. So if they peril, that's not likely. Cornered. Score this immediately if a friendly fighter takes an enemy fighter out of action with an attack action that is only successful because their target is trapped. Dashed Hopes. Score this in an end phase if your warband took at least one inspired enemy fighter out. Girded for Battle. Score this in an end phase if all surviving friendly fighters, at least 3, have at least 1 upgrade. Grand Melee. Score this in an end phase if at least 3 enemy fighters were damaged in the preceding action phase. That would be okay if it was more than 1 glory. Martyred. Score this immediately if the first fighter taken out of action in this round is a friendly fighter. That's interesting. That might be useful to run with a whole bunch of Dangle Bros. Put that aside. Neck and Neck. Score this in an end phase if you and an opponent are tied for glory points. No Heroes. Score this in the third phase if there's at least 3 surviving friendly fighters and none are inspired. Opening Gambit. Score this in an end phase if you scored at least 1 objective card in the preceding action phase. So that's a dead draw on the first turn. Trash to Treasure. Score this immediately if an opponent discards 3 objective cards in an end phase. That's interesting. So what's the timing on that? So you're holding your cards, you both decide whether to go to dump cards or not, and then you score and then you pick 3 up, or you pick, yeah. Anyway, interesting card. Brute Force. Score this immediately if a friendly fighter's attack action succeeds. Score this in an end phase if you scored at least 2 objective cards in the preceding action phase. So this is a win more card. 2 objective cards in the preceding action phase. That might be useful. Ganging Up. Score this immediately if all hexes adjacent to a single enemy fighter other than blocked or incomplete hexes contain friendly fighters. I think I already have this. We'll have to check, but otherwise that's pretty good for score immediately 2 glory. Hail and Hole. Score this in an end phase if no friendly fighters are out of action and no friendly fighters have wound tokens. No opening. Score this in an end phase if your opponent scored no objectives in the preceding action phase. Score this in a quick on your feet. Score this in an end phase if all surviving friendly fighters, at least 3, made a move action. Singled out. Score this in an end phase if a surviving friendly fighter has 3 or more upgrades. Strong Start. Score this immediately if the first fighter taken out of action in this round is an enemy fighter. Swift Beheading. Score this in an end phase if your warband took an enemy leader out of action in this phase and that leader was the first fighter taken out of action. Total Dominance. Score this if there are no surviving enemy fighters and no friendly fighters out of action. 6 Glory. Score this immediately if your leader takes an enemy wizard out of action. That is a good card because there's a lot of wizards now. Okay, 3 cards out of all those that are usable. Let's look at ploys. Alright, here we go. There's the Briar Queen. Aggressive Defense. Reaction. Play this during an attack action that takes a target as a friendly fighter before the attack roll. You cannot make a defense roll, but the target of the attack action cannot be driven back after the attack action. If the fighter survives, immediately make an attack action. Interesting. That's an interesting reaction. I'd rather not take the damage, I think. Center of Attention. Choose a fighter and push all other fighters that are within 2 hexes of that fighter up to 1 hex so that they are closer to that fighter in any order you choose. Interesting. So this is similar to that other card which targets a hex with an objective on it. So similar action card. Damning Pact. Well, this might be useful in the ghosts if you're trying to get your guys adjacent at the end of your opponent's turn. You play this and all your ghosts that are within 2 hexes get drawn that 1 hex closer. Within 2 hexes, so 1 hex, so they would be within 1 hex, so they would be adjacent, and then they would all inspire. All other fighters within 2 hexes. That might have some play. It's a little bit more useful for our inspiration than the objective one. Damning Pact. Choose a friendly wizard. They suffer 1 damage. The first time they attempt to cast a spell before the next power step, any fighter damaged by that spell suffers 1 additional damage. Interesting. Dancing with Death. Reaction. Play this after an attack action that targets a friendly fighter and fails. You can push the target up to 2 hexes. Ghoulish Pact. Choose a friendly fighter and an upgrade card from your hand, and you can apply. Choose a friendly fighter and an upgrade card from your hand that you can apply to that fighter. That fighter suffers 1 damage. If they survive, apply the upgrade. That's pretty good, but not as good as the one that just lets you apply an upgrade. Instinctive Denial. Play this when an enemy fighter adjacent to a friendly fighter casts a spell. Before the spell is resolved, roll a defense dice. Okay, so this is a dispel, an unbind basically, but has to be adjacent. Revoke. Choose 1 persisting ploy. That ploy is discarded. Okay, but not spell. I'm not sure if there are many persisting ploys. I can't remember now. That ploy is discarded. Sphere of Ulgu. This is a spell. Gambit with 1 swirl. If this spell is cast, attack actions in the next activation have -1 dice. Spiked Surface. Play this during a friendly fighter's... so it looks like the dwarves might be coming because there's a dwarf dude there. Anyway, play this during a friendly fighter's attack action in which the target fighter is trapped and is in an edge hex and or adjacent to a blocked hex. They suffer 1 damage. That's a little bit too situational. Sudden Paranoia. Enemy fighters cannot provide support during the first attack action. Baffling Illusion. The first time a fighter would make a move action in the next activation, their player instead scatters X from that hex that fighter occupies and pushes the fighter along the chain to the end hex. X is the fighter's move characteristic. If the fighter cannot be pushed into a hex, the push ends in last hex. Place a move token. Okay. So you could just avoid it by not moving. Emboldened. Reaction. Play this after an attack action that targets a friendly fighter and fails. Remove 1 wound token. Haymaker. +2 dice. Wow. +2 dice for the first attack action made by a friendly fighter. You cannot make defense rolls for that fighter. The latter effect persists until that fighter is out of action or the end of the round, whichever happens first. Interesting. Lethal Ward. Choose an objective token. Any fighter in the same hex as that token suffers 1 damage. Quick Exchange. Choose 2 adjacent friendly fighters who each have at least 1 upgrade that could be applied to the other fighter, and you swap them basically. Interesting. Regal Vision. Choose a friendly fighter that is holding an objective. That fighter becomes inspired. Rend the Earth. 2 lightning gambit spell. If the spell is cast, all the fighters adjacent suffer 1 damage. Sphere of Haish. 2 lightning gambit spell. If the spell is cast, attack actions have +1 dice. Unchecked Energy. Choose a lethal hex. Roll an attack dice for each fighter in or adjacent to that hex. 50% chance of being rolled for suffers 1 damage. Vertigo. Cool card. Reaction. Play this during an action or gambit that uses the scatter token. After the scatter token is placed, but before any dice are rolled, choose how the scatter token is oriented. Before the dice are rolled, doesn't matter then. Useless card. Okay. So only one possible useful one for me there. This center of attention as a pull for my guys to get inspired. Might be useful. Alright, upgrades. Champion's Fortitude. Reroll 1 defense dice each time you make a defense roll. Not too bad. That might be pretty useful on a double dodge character. Circlet of Companionship. When this fighter is adjacent to 2 or more friendly fighters, this fighter has +1 defense. Cloak of Shadows. When this fighter is adjacent to no fighters, this fighter has +1 defense. Horrifying Armor. -1 wound. Adjacent enemy fighter attack against -1 dice. That's pretty nice. Mirror of Spite. Reaction. During an enemy fighter's attack action that takes this fighter out of action, before removing them, all adjacent enemy fighters suffer 1 damage. Nullstone Darts. So the Nullstone weapons are the anti-wizard weapons. 3 range, 3 sword, 1 damage. Reroll 1 dice against wizards. Potion of Grace. After a move token is placed next to this fighter, discard this card and remove that token. Ooh. It's like a double move. Well, it doesn't let you make a move though, but you still have to make another activation, but that is pretty cool. Ready for the fight. Reaction. After an enemy fighter's move action that is part of a charge action, you can push this fighter up to 2 hexes. This push must bring them adjacent. We've seen that before, I think, in the Zinch book. Seeking Blade. 2 hammers, 1 damage. Rolls of dodge are no successes. Tome of Glory. So here's another, the 3rd Cataphrane Tome. Tome of Glory's action. If this fighter is holding an objective, gain 1 glory point. Place a charge token next to this fighter. Whoa, that's nice. So you basically make a dangle bro that holds all 3 tomes. I think one of them was damage, one of them was something else, and then one of them is this, where you just spend an action per round. So it's up to 3. Well, let's say best case scenario 2 glory for just sitting there. But you, interesting. I don't think there's enough tomes right now, but maybe 4 might be the critical mass when we might start seeing tome stacking. Butcher's Eye. If there are any crits in an attack roll for this fighter's attack action, resolve it as cleave. Dirty Fighting. Reaction. After this fighter's attack action that targets an adjacent enemy fighter and fails, roll an attack action on a 50% chance they suffer 1 damage. That's no good. Glory Seeker. +1 damage to this fighter's attack action that targets a fighter with 4 or more wounds. Enchanted Greaves. Fighter treats lethal hexes as normal hexes. I already got that. Nullstone Sword. It's another anti. A 3 dagger, 2 damage weapon. 3 hammer, 2 damage weapon that rerolls 1 dice against wizards. That's pretty nice. I'll have to compare it to some of the other weapon upgrades. Potion of Constitution. During attack action or gamut that damages this fighter, reduce the damage suffered by 1. Discard the card. Slumbering Key. If this fighter is not out of action in the third end phase, gain 1 glory point. That will be better than any of the other keys where you sit on an objective. Sword Breaker. 3 hammers, 2 damage. On a critical hit, you choose one of the target fighter's upgrades, and the card is discarded. Here's another tome. Action, choose this fighter or an adjacent friendly fighter. Their next attack action is +1 dice. So not useful in itself, but if you're stacking tomes, now that's I believe that card that scores per tome is 4 glory now. So maybe that becomes worthwhile if you got nothing else to spend upgrades on. Touch of Death. 1 hammer, 3 damage. Place a charge token next to any fighter damaged by this attack action. Only wizards can use it. That's pretty good. It's only 1 hammer though. Fitty of doing 3 damage, and they can't do anything because they act as charged. Interesting. Okay, so a few decent cards along there. 7 cards that are possible for the deck, so that's not bad really out of a deck like that. So that's it. So hope you enjoyed this quick little unboxing and review of the Echoes of Glory box. I think it is worth picking up, and so you should do that. Thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing to the channel and supporting us on Patreon. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time.